Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was beautiful in the park. The weather was warm in September. All the trees were bright orange and yellow. The leaves were falling and swirling beautifully in the wind and rustling merrily underfoot. Retired James was walking his dog. The young dog, Bax, would run after a thrown stick and burrow his nose merrily into the leaves, bring them back, and look faithfully into his master's eyes, waiting for well-deserved praise. The old man patted him on the withers and gave him some goodies, saying, "Hey, young man, good dog, I love you. Come on, let's go home. Time for dinner." And the man and the dog walked home leisurely. James, in his 60s, did not look much, and he dressed very modestly, almost poorly, but he was always clean and tidy. Every morning he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, shaved smoothly with a dangerous razor, and wore cologne according to an old habit he had developed over the years. It was just that life had taken its toll on him, and the long years of dreary loneliness were taking their toll. And once upon a time he had everything like everyone else, a beloved wife and a long-awaited son. They met Nancy at the factory, worked together. She was a storekeeper, and he was an equipment fitter. At first, there were friendly gatherings in the workroom over a cup of tea and cookies. Then he volunteered to walk the woman home from the second shift. Gradually, they grew closer and humbly married. There was never any kind of violent love passion between them, but there was spiritual closeness and warmth almost immediately. They lived together heart to heart and rarely quarreled. When Nancy became pregnant, she was very happy. She carried her baby easily, without complications, and the son was born healthy and on time. Thomas grew up smart and intelligent, but very quick-tempered and explosive. He had a temper of his own. After high school, he refused to go to the construction college in their town and decided to go to the metropolis in search of a better life. Nancy cried and begged James to influence Thomas, because she knew this was not going to end well. The father and his son ended up having a big fight. James shouted, unable to contain himself, "Son, come to your senses. Don't be so harsh. You have to get an education first, and then look for a job. If you don't want to study and live here, let's go to Boston and look at colleges or schools. There's a million of them out there, but you better figure out what you want to be first. You know, without experience and education, you won't get a good job anyway." But the boy argued passionately to his father, "I'm not going to slave all my life in some shitty factory and get a pittance. It's a time of great opportunity. There's an acquaintance of mine who left, and he's working as a courier, and he makes more money than that. I've made up my mind. The train leaves tomorrow at 10. I'll prove to you all that Thomas can do it all by himself, and you'll be proud of me." My father jumped on the spot. "How dare you say that? So you think my mother and I are nothing? Do you have any idea how hard it is to tune machines, how much you need to know and be able to do? How dare you say that? So go to Los Angeles and see what happens. But I'm against it, you know that." The farewell was very gloomy. Father and son had little or no contact. It hurt James to tears that his son and his mother had no regard for him, when they loved him so much, had put their hearts into him. Nancy only cried and hugged her son goodbye, as if she felt in advance that it was the last time she would see him. 5 years passed. My son called in frequently, talking dryly, as if to strangers. He told me that he was doing well, working as a cab driver, renting an apartment. But he did not hurry to visit his parents, though they were waiting for him and missed him very much, and he did not invite him to his place. All this, of course, greatly shook the nervous system of his father and mother, because no matter how you look at it, your own little blood, and the heart for it always hurts. But it turned out to be just a taste of things to come. On that black, fateful day, from the morning, Nancy was not herself. She woke up in tears. A worried James asked, "My darling, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Does something hurt?" The woman answered through sobs, "You know, I dreamed about Thomas. For some reason he was reaching out to me, like when I was a kid, asking for forgiveness. And I kept wanting to hug him, but it was like he was slipping away from me, farther and farther away. That's not good. That's bad luck." The man held his wife close to him, and comforted her as best he could. "Come on, don't get yourself worked up. It's just a bad dream, that's all. It's okay. Go wash your face, and we'll get ready for work." But already at lunchtime, there was a frightening call. It was the EMERCOM service. The attendant introduced himself and reported in a loud voice, "Your son Thomas died like a hero. He saved 3 children who had fallen through the ice, but unfortunately he did not survive. The doctors fought for his life to the last moment. We offer our condolences. We will pay for his funeral and reward him posthumously." James went pale and clutched at his heart. He could not make sense of these words. Nancy knew from her husband's reaction that something irreparable had happened and began to scream. "James, what happened? Tell me now. Is it Thomas? Jesus, don't be silent." The man barely spoke. "It was not for nothing that you had a bad dream. That's it, our son's gone. All gone. He saved 3 children from the freezing water, but he died. We have to go and get the body and do the funeral. EMERCOM said they'll pay for everything, and they'll award him posthumously." Nancy seemed distraught. She was shaking the man, punching him in the chest with her fists and screaming in her voice. "What are you saying? Are you saying our son is dead? Is he dead? And we'll never see him again? Tell me that's not true. I don't believe it. My son, Thomas." She was hysterical, and then she lost consciousness. The next thing was a pompous funeral. A lot of people came, all sympathizing with the inconsolable parents and thanking them for their son. After all, he was a real hero. He gave his life and saved 3 children. The parents were actually given an award and compensation, but what was the use? No one could bring their son back. Nancy fell on the coffin and hugged the gray, lifeless body of her son. She screamed, "Wake up, darling, wake up, dear. How will we live without you? For what? How, Thomas? Who did you leave us for? Why didn't you take care of yourself?" They dragged her away by force, sedated her, and gave her smelling salts. And James was as if in a dream, looking at the whole procession and not understanding why all these people were here. And what did the man in the coffin have to do with Thomas? He didn't even look like him at all, did he? It was as if his mind refused to accept the terrible truth. After the funeral, Nancy never recovered. She took more and more heart medication, lost weight, turned black, and aged 10 years at once. The woman cried day and night, refused to eat, and a month later she had a massive heart attack. She never left the hospital. She died right there in the ICU. Again, tears, pain, suffering, and funerals. James thought everything that had happened was a nightmare, a delusion, an evil fate. He missed his wife terribly, for Nancy was the closest person in his life. And now it was as if he were an orphan. The house was at once empty and desolate without his mistress. Everything reminded him of Nancy. Everywhere he looked, he saw her as if she were alive. There was her hairbrush by the mirror, and there was Nancy in front of him. There she is smiling, smearing her face with cream before going to bed and combing her hair. Here is her favorite cup in polka dots. And there she is, as if alive, sitting quietly in the corner in her chintz robe, drinking strong black tea, always with a slice of lemon. It was just unbearable. My heart was torn into 1,000 pieces. In the morning, the alarm clock rang, and the man used to look for his wife with his hands to kiss her and wake her up. She always had a hard time getting up in the morning. He whispered to the empty pillow, "Wake up, my dear, wake up, or we'll be late for work." But the answer was a ringing silence, and the man jumped up sharply in panic, and then remembered that there is no more Nancy, and there never will be. At first, James even got drunk. Every day after work, he took a bottle and drank it down his throat, then fell asleep. He wanted to get away from the terrible reality, to forget, to die, and to be with his wife and son in heaven as soon as possible. It got worse. He started skipping classes because he was hung over in the morning and was in no condition to work. They took pity on him and, for the time being, turned a blind eye since he was in such a state of grief. And he was a responsible worker. He had never failed before. But soon the matter came to a head. James was tossing on the bed, shouting incoherent phrases through his alcoholic sleep. "Nancy, don't cry, I beg you. My son, my darling." The gate was open, and the doors of the house were unlocked, too. The man woke up to someone shaking him violently and hitting him violently on his scratchy, unshaven cheeks. He jumped in surprise. His head hurt like hell, his mouth was dry, and the huge figure of the foreman, Liam, loomed over him. He shouted in foul language and dragged James into the bathroom. He put his head under the cold water and started pouring it mercilessly. The landlord screamed and wriggled, not understanding anything, but he sobered up at once. Liam continued his fiery speech. "So, James, I've put up with your binges for a long time. I understand. Grief and misery and all that. But there's a limit to everything. You have 3 days. Come to your senses, stop drinking, and be as fresh as a cucumber at the shop on Monday. Otherwise, I'll have your dismissal order on my desk. Do you understand?" James said doomfully. "Well, if that's the case, throw me out. I can't stop drinking. It's bad for me. Do you understand or not? My wife and son are just before my eyes. Why should I live now? For whom? At least I'll die faster, and I'll be with them together." Liam thought about it, scratched his chin, and suddenly said silently, "Let's go with me. Quickly. Hurry up," I said. James, knowing the brigadier's fierce temper, followed him, still not understanding. Where were they going and why? Liam silently put him in his old car, and they drove to the local junkyard. They got out quietly, too, and the man dragged James deep inside, through mountains of stinking and decaying garbage. There were several squalid bums rummaging about. They were dressed in rags, their hands were covered with sores, and among them was a woman. The foreman waved at them like old acquaintances and said, "Hey guys, meet James. Frank, tell me, how did you end up here? What were you before? I'm sorry to ask, but I really need this. It's a matter of life and death for him." And he pointed his finger at the dazed Frank. He stomped squeamishly and could barely contain his gagging. The tramp, greatly embarrassed, answered, "I'm actually a professor of mathematics. I worked half my life in the department at the local university. And then I was in a car accident with my family. Everyone died, my wife and 2 children. And I, as luck would have it, survived. I couldn't cope with the grief. I drank like hell. At first I thought I could stop if I wanted to, but I got more and more drawn in. I sold my apartment in the center, drank the money away, and bought a room in a Khrushchevka. I got kicked out of my job, of course. And then the black realtors scammed me, and I gave them the room for next to nothing when I was drunk. That's the whole story. Now I'm a bum. There's a lot of people like me. Here, Maria. She has 3 children in orphanages, had bad luck with her husband, turned out to be a jerk, robbed her to the bone and kicked her out. She's only 32 and that's her fate." Shocked, James listened in silence. He kept looking at the shaggy, unwashed woman, who could have been in her 50s. He'd always thought tramps were the dregs of society. That is, it was their own fault for being at the bottom. And here it was. Liam, satisfied with the effect produced, thanked the tramp, gave him some money for food, and told James, "Well, James, your life. It's up to you. If you don't stop drinking, you'll soon join the bums and company. Or I'll see you at work on Monday. Goodbye. I don't have time. I'm not gonna whine. I'm not gonna feel sorry for you. You're not the first. You're not the last. You're not a stupid man. You'll figure out what to do next. You can go home on your own." James had a little more time to talk to the poor souls. It turns out how many broken lives, how many good people like him were just lost, drowned in the alcoholic abyss. He began to get out of the trash, and suddenly he heard a faint squeak. He bent down and found in a wet cardboard box a helpless thin puppy. It whimpered pitifully from cold and hunger, and looked at him hopefully. The heart of the grief-stricken man trembled. Something in him turned over, and James carefully wrapped the baby in his jacket, behind the sinus, into the warmth, and almost ran home. The first thing he did was build the puppy a bed and feed him plenty of food. He had to go shopping, whether he wanted to or not. Then he looked around and gasped. What a mess he had made of his place while he was drinking. There was 3 fingers of dust everywhere, mountains of dirty dishes, leftovers, and empty bottles. After what he had seen at the dump, the thirst vanished like a cutoff. He looked at the portrait of Nancy in the black frame and looked her straight in the eye and promised, "I'm sorry, you little pigeon, I lost it. I promise, that's it, not a drop more. For you, for Thomas, I can't be a bum and lose our home. It's the memory of you, our family nest. Do you believe me?" James furiously tossed the empty bottles into the trash and put the house in order. Bax was running beside him, barking cheerfully and cheerfully twirling his bushy tail, helping his master not to mope. The man had never drank since that day and had no desire to, as he had worked in the factory before and had recently retired. He was seen off with honors. Bax had long ago grown from a puppy into a big old dog and served his master faithfully. James, to pass the time, often fed stray animals and did something to help the strays. After that story, he felt very sorry for them. It took a lot of money, and his meager pension wasn't enough. Then the pensioner decided to find a part-time job. At first, he got a job as a security guard at a private parking lot. But that did not last long. He had to fight at night with brazen brothers who did not want to pay, and he was badly beaten up. The abrasions and bruises were gone, of course, but James realized one thing: this job wasn't for him anymore. Today, after his walk with Bax, he bought a newspaper with job ads and started leafing through them, hoping to find something lighter. That's when the strange ad caught his eye. An elderly man is needed for a semi-waitress and unlike job. Please contact me at the phone number below for all information. The surprised James thought about it and decided that if I was not, I would at least call to find out what the job was all about. And if it's just another scam, I'll always be able to refuse. He pulled himself together and dialed the right number. A young woman answered, judging by her voice. The man introduced himself. "Good afternoon. My name is James. I am a pensioner. I am calling from an advertisement. I would like to know what the job is and what the pay is." The woman was clearly embarrassed, coughed, and answered hastily. "The work is not difficult, but we need to meet and discuss everything. It's a delicate matter. Can you be at the Lotus restaurant in an hour? I'll meet you there. My name is Cindy. We'll discuss it there. Okay?" The old man was even more surprised. Wow, to the restaurant. Maybe it was his mistress or someone important. The old man was even more surprised by the fact that it might be his mistress or someone important. Nevertheless, the intrigued pensioner was at the door of the expensive restaurant like a bayonet at the appointed time. He did not dare go inside. A young, pretty woman in a waitress's uniform came rushing out to meet him. She said hello and said hurriedly, "I work here. Come to my back room and we'll talk there." The woman brewed aromatic, delicious coffee, treated the old man, and began a conversation. "So, like I said, it's a very delicate matter. I have a son, Mike. He's 7 years old. He goes to a special boarding school for the deaf and dumb. But he was actually born healthy. But a year ago, he and I were crossing the road, and we witnessed a terrible accident. Before our eyes, a drunk driver hit a woman to death. Oh, what was there? Not for the faint of heart. Mike, after what he saw, he went numb. Doesn't talk at all now. I've already taken him to psychologists and witch doctors, all to no avail. And this year, he had to go to school, so I had to give him to a boarding school, although he is very smart and bright. You see, I am an orphan. We have no relatives. My son and I live alone. We rent a room. So soon the orphanage will be celebrating autumn. There will be a matinee. I'm at work, and there's no way I could get time off. It's strict here. And my son dreams that his grandfather will come to him, as if he were his own. A lot of kids make fun of him for not having anyone to visit him but me. Could you play the role of a native grandfather? It's no big deal. I'll introduce you in 3 days, make friends, get along, and then go with him to the matinee, see how he performs. That's all. Tell you the truth, I do not have a lot of money, but in order to fulfill the dream of my child, I'll give the last. So you agree?" At first, the old man was very surprised at such a strange request. But then he thought, what, in fact, have I got to lose? I'm bored alone in four walls anyway. At least this way I get to unwind, talk to my child. And he agreed. As arranged, Cindy brought the pensioner home on the eve of the holiday. The old man looked around. The room was clean and cozy, smelling of cinnamon and something muffinous. At the table sat a charming boy with huge gray eyes and dimples on his cheeks. He smiled openly and friendly and waved to the pensioner in greeting. Cindy began gesturing and lip-cinching to try to introduce them. "Son, meet Grandpa James. He's going to the matinee with you, just like you wanted. Are you excited?" The boy clapped his hands and gestured to explain something too. The old man raised his lips easily. "I'm Mike. Let's be friends, huh? Shall we go build a construction set? I have such a cool one, my mom gave it to me." And he led James to the toys, taking his hand confidentially. This handshake, the warmth of the little child's hand, sent a wave of unprecedented tenderness and warmth through the pensioner. Somehow he was so attracted to the boy, just as his own grandchild. They made friends quickly, and an hour later they were playing and talking easily. Cindy only smiled and exhaled a sigh of relief. She was so afraid of this foolish undertaking, worried, who will respond? But when she saw that the same kind old man, who often feeds stray dogs from his pocket, came, her heart was relieved. Such a man would certainly not hurt a child, since he loves animals. And so the day of the party came. James got ready. He wore his best suit and shirt, shaved smooth, and looked pretty decent. In the band, he helped Mike change his clothes. The boy played the part of the bear. Cindy did her best and bought the little guy a nice costume. The old man sat in the front row. He clapped his hands, took pictures, and was very supportive of Mike. He was glowing with happiness and played his part well. And after the matinee, when the children had a sweet meal, the happy boy gestured to the other children. "That's my own grandfather, James. He came to my matinee." But suddenly one of the boys began to say something at his mother, and the mother, with her lips pressed together, announced loudly, "Who are you listening to, son? He ain't no grandpa. I've known this dog handler for a long time. He's got all the stray dogs in our neighborhood. No salvation. He's a fake grandpa." The crowd murmured disapprovingly. James wanted to fall to the ground, and the boy was also upset and embarrassed. He almost cried, for he had been so cruelly ridiculed by his classmates. James looked reproachfully at the squabbling lady and whispered softly to her, "You and your mother. Aren't you ashamed? You spit in the child's soul. Does that make you feel better?" And he said aloud, "Thank you all for the treats, but Mike and I have to go home. Get dressed, grandson. I'm waiting for you in the hallway. Bye-bye." He took the boy by the hand, and they walked home. Tears glistened in beads in the boy's eyes, and he walked quite dejectedly. The old man couldn't stand it and turned him to face him. Started to explain to him, "Mike, listen to what I have to say. I once had a wife and a son too. His name was Thomas. But they died a long time ago, and I've been living alone for years. I have no one at all. Is it wrong that I pity and feed poor abandoned animals? I just feel sorry for them. I also have a huge dog at home, Bax. I found him as a puppy in a dumpster. He's so handsome. Would you like to take him for a walk sometime? You're not alone. You have a mom. She loves you very much. I'm interested in you too. You're like my grandson. Do you want me to come and visit you, just for fun? And don't listen to stupid and mean boys, they're mean. I'll teach you how to answer them and how to stand up for yourself. All right? And let's not say anything to Mom. We don't want to upset her. You and I are men." The boy smiled again, nodded his head, and snuggled trustingly into the pensioner. Once again, James was all over the place. In the evening, when a tired Cindy rushed home from work, she saw an adorable picture. James and Mike were busy making a boat out of cardboard. They were laughing, talking, and it was obvious that they were having a good time together. The woman began to ask how the matinee went. The old man began to tell. "Don't worry, Cindy. Everything is fine. Mike was great. He gave such a good performance. I took all the pictures and recorded it like you asked. Then there was a candy table." The boy also showed a sign of class with his pen, without a word of mentioning the incident. Cindy looked at the old man gratefully and reached into her purse for the money. "Thank you so much, James. You've helped me out so much. The most important thing is that Mike is very happy. That's the most important thing to me. Here, take it," as agreed. The man gibbered. "Take it away, Cindy. I won't take any money. I'm sincerely glad I met him, and I helped from the heart. Mike and I have become very good friends. Will you let me come to him as your grandson? I'm all alone, and he's such a nice boy." The woman rejoiced. "Of course, James, come. I'll be glad to see you. When Mike is with you, under your supervision, I feel safer. As you can see, my schedule is crazy, and I'm always nervous when he's home alone. Sometimes I have to leave him at home overnight. Even though he doesn't like it so much, he always asks to go home." And so they became friends. The old man got a second wind. He often went out with Mike to visit him. They played and read together, and they both had such a good time together. The boy was really clever and quick-witted. He caught math examples on the fly and solved them straight away. But he couldn't talk, as if something was in the way. One day, the old man decided to invite Mike to his house. He asked Jenna, who didn't mind, especially since she had a shift until the evening, and her son had to stay home by himself. This would give her some peace of mind, and she would be supervised. James got ready, cleaned thoroughly, literally licked everything to a shine, made a delicious lunch, and bought candy for Mike, as well as pencils and a sketchbook. In case the boy wanted to draw, Mike was happy, for he and his mother had no relatives or friends, and they didn't go anywhere to visit, especially since his grandfather had promised to introduce him to Bax the dog. The boy adored dogs. He couldn't wait to meet them. He kept asking his mother for a puppy, but the woman wasn't up to it with such a busy job. James and Mike had a wonderful time all day, the man teaching the boy how to make a wooden bench. For the first time in his life, the boy was passionately holding a hammer and hammering real nails. He was extremely proud of himself because he is engaged in a real man's work. "This is not a flower from a paper with my mother to cut out." It was getting evening outside, and soon his mother was going to come and get him. Mike was in a hurry. He wanted to build the stool before she came, and to show off his achievements. There was a knock at the gate, and the joyful little boy thought to himself, "Mama's here." He ran to open it. But on the doorstep, instead of Jenna, were 3 thugs, clearly just out of prison. They rudely pushed the frightened boy aside and approached the old man, grinning wickedly. Stunned by this insolence, James became indignant. "What's the matter, citizens? What do you think you're doing? What right do you have to break into someone else's house like that? And what do you want here? I don't think we know each other." One of the brothers spit his gum on the ground and grinned. "Don't play dumb with us here, Daddy. Tell us now where your son, the scumbag, has stashed the stolen gold. Obviously, it's here somewhere, at home, nowhere else. We've done our part, so it's time to give back our share." James didn't understand anything yet, but he sensed that a serious scuffle was brewing. So he leaned over to the terrified Mike and whispered softly to him, "Don't be afraid of anything. Get in the house, lock yourself in, and call the police and an ambulance. Hurry up and—" The little boy just nodded his head and rushed as fast as he could into the house, and with shaking hands began to close the lock from the inside. He was so badly stressed that the little boy was all sweaty and crying. The only time he had been so scared was when he saw a car run over a woman in front of him. Mike dialed the police. They picked up the phone, and he, not knowing how it happened, suddenly spoke. "Hello. Help. Help. Grandpa's being killed. 13 Alvarado Street. Hurry up, we're being attacked by bandits." The police officer on duty, hearing the child's voice, wondered if it was a joke and asked again, "Boy, what's your name? Are you sure you're not joking? Mind you, there's a penalty for making a false call." But the baby already repeated confidently, almost sobbing, "I'm Mike. Please hurry, Alvarado 13. I'm begging you. They're already hitting Grandpa. I can see it through the window. There are 3 of them. One of them has a knife." A patrol was immediately dispatched to the address, and events in the yard unfolded as follows. James, realizing that the baby was temporarily safe, did not waste an important second, and in one fell swoop jumped over the fence and ran up to the dog. The dog was barking and coming off his leash. The man tore off the chain and shouted as hard as he could. "Bucks, get it. Come on, don't let me down, save me, honey." The dog immediately rushed to the rescue with a roar and bared fangs. A fierce scuffle ensued. If it hadn't been for Bax, who immediately knocked one of the thugs down, the old man would probably have been put down at once. The strength was clearly not on his side, and his age was making itself felt. The second man became violent and drew a knife, and in the heat of the struggle wounded both the pensioner and the dog. Finally, several patrol cars arrived. Police officers ran into the courtyard and quickly twisted the arms of the bandits. The old man, bleeding, tried to explain everything to them. "There's a child in the house, a grandchild. Mike. He must have been really scared. He and I were making a stool when those scoundrels broke in. I don't know who they are or what they want. I've worked as a factory fitter all my life. I'm not connected with criminals. You can check." An ambulance arrived and the pensioner was taken to the emergency room. Cindy was just coming up to James' house, and she saw the ambulance and police driving away. She ran into the yard and almost fainted. There was blood all around, a bleeding dog lying on the ground, wheezing and breathing heavily. Her heart sank, and she thought in terror, "My God, where is my son? What is wrong with him? What happened here in the first place?" On cotton legs and in a fainting state, she entered the house. A scared to death Mike and one of the police officers were waiting for her. He stayed with the boy. When he saw his mother, the child immediately rushed toward her and screamed, "Mommy, Grandpa James was shot by bandits." They broke into the yard and attacked. Grandpa told me to run into the house, lock myself in, and call the police. So I did. Wasn't I good? How was Bax? He almost ripped the bandits apart and defended us. The woman grabbed her son in her arms, began kissing him and crying. "Son, my darling, are you talking? I don't believe it. Oh my gosh, I don't understand it myself. I was so frightened for you, my darling." The policeman gave her a brief outline of the situation and complimented the kid. "He's a hero. He didn't chicken out. He was able to call the police and an ambulance. A real hero. But it's a pity about the old man. He's unlikely to survive. His wound is very serious. He lost a lot of blood. The dog was also dying. Who knows what those bastards wanted? It just got out of jail. They were doing time. Maybe they got mixed up with someone else. We'll look into it." Cindy fumbled. "Bucks. God, he needs help too. It's too bad about him. Where's the nearest vet clinic? I'll pay for a cab and take the dog." A policeman volunteered to help. "By the time the cab gets here, he'll be dead for sure. Come on, I'll take him. It'll be faster with flashing lights." "You're right, it's a shame about the dog. He laid down his life for his master. That's true dog loyalty." Cindy wrapped the shaking dog in a blanket, and the three of them drove to the clinic. They got there just in time. Bax was operated on, his side stitched up, and handed over to them. The dog was under anesthesia. The doctor prescribed antibiotics and told them to give him shots and ointment for the wound. The policeman drove them back to the old man's house and left for duty, and a tired Cindy sighed and told Mike, "Well, son, we'll have to stay here for a while. Take care of Bax, and we'll go see James tomorrow. I'm going to call and take a week off from work and check with the hospital to see how Grandpa's doing." Mike stayed close to the dog, listening to see if he was breathing, stroking his fur. There were tears in his big baby gray eyes. He whispered softly, "Baxic, honey, don't die, please. I want you to get better. We'll go for a walk with you again. I'll buy you some tasty bones with Grandpa James. Come on, open your eyes." Cindy learned that James had been operated on, but he was still in serious condition, told to come back tomorrow. She sat down next to Mike right on the floor and stroked her son and dog. On the one hand, she was happy that her son was talking. The stress must have had an effect. As they say, you fight fire with fire. But on the other hand, she felt so sorry for James and Bax. It was scary to think that their lives might have been ruined because of some criminals, if the police hadn't gotten there in time. And with her son, anything could have happened. Just thinking about it made her sick. She recovered a little from the shock and looked around. The house was clean and tidy, and the old man was good. Suddenly, she saw a portrait of a young boy on the wall, and she almost cried out. She was shocked. It was her fiancé, Thomas, who had given birth to Mike. So James was, unknowingly, nursing his own grandson. There's a reason he had such a crush on the baby from day one. It was just unbelievable. The tears rolled from her eyes on their own, and she kept stroking the portrait, remembering her once favorite features and whispering something. A frightened Mike ran up to her and asked, "Mom, why are you crying? Who is that man in the picture? Do you know him? Grandpa told me it was his son, and he died a long time ago." She hugged her son tightly and whispered, "I know, Mike. Of course I know. That's your daddy. And Grandpa James isn't a stranger to you. He's your real family, you know. That's how it is." The little boy jumped for joy. "I knew it. He made me feel so good and interesting. I felt he loved me, you know. Are we going to see him in the hospital tomorrow? He's not going to die, is he?" Then Bax whimpered weakly in pain and began to regain consciousness after the anesthesia. Mike took up his post again, brought him some water, and began to slowly water him, wetting his dry nose. The dog licked his hand weakly and drank a little. The baby perked up. "Hooray, Mommy!" Bax opened his eyes and drank water. So he's feeling a little better now, but his nose is dry and hot. Maybe it's time to give him a shot. Cindy and Mike stayed with the dog half the night, stroking and comforting him. And the woman barely put her exhausted son to bed and fell asleep herself. And early in the morning, they gave Bax a bandage and went to see James. Cindy boiled some chicken broth and made a rose hip infusion. It's said to be a good restorative. The old man had already been moved to the general ward and was on a drip. The crisis had passed overnight. Cindy talked to the attending physician, bought the necessary medicines, and they went to see him. James was very happy to see such dear people. He smiled and waved. Mike leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, whispering, "Hello, Grandpa. Are you okay? I was so worried about you. Bax had an operation too, and we're treating him. He's a little better now." The old man didn't understand anything yet, but he was very happy that Mike was talking. "Oh, well done, grandson. Are you starting to talk? You betcha. Now you can't stop it." That's how it was not a blessing, but a blessing in disguise. Then he turned to Jenna and started making excuses. "You must be angry with me. Sorry, old man. I'm not a good babysitter. But I really don't know what those thugs wanted. They rushed in so suddenly, shouting that my son supposedly hid gold in the house, and that I have to return it to them. But that's just nonsense. Thomas had been dead for years, but he had lived in Los Angeles for a long time before that, and he never came to see me and my mother. And he worked in a cab, so where did the gold come from? Anyway, I never knew what they were looking for. Maybe the police would figure it out. But I was really scared for Mike. The three of them jumped on me. I thought I would not survive, but I was spurred on by the thought that the child was alone in the house, and that he was in danger. I fought to the last man, thanks to Bax. He rushed to my rescue. Chest defended me. I couldn't have done it without him. You're not mad at me, are you?" Cindy calmed the man down and took his hand. "I'll be honest, I was really scared for Mike, and for you, and for Bax. But it wasn't your fault, and it wasn't your fault this nightmare happened. Especially since Mike is talking out of shock. Don't worry, don't beat yourself up. You need to get better and get your strength back. I brought you some broth. We're going to eat now, and then I need to talk to you." Cindy helped the old man eat and made his bed. He looked at her with such gratitude and almost cried. In his long years of loneliness, this woman, whom they had not known so long in fact, was the first person who had cared for him so sincerely and reverently. It was so touching, and the soul, dried up by longing, was finally filled with warmth. The woman lifted the pillows and said, "Mike, Bunny, please run down to the cupboard and get me a cup of coffee and a bun, and whatever you want. Can you do that? I need to talk to Grandpa James." The boy rushed off to do his mother's responsible work, and Cindy gathered her wits and asked, "James, tell me whose portrait is hanging on your bedroom wall at home. It's very important for me to know." The surprised old man replied, "This is my late son, Thomas. He died 7 years ago." "Why, do you two know each other?" Jenna shook, tears flowing past her will again from her eyes. "My darling, you don't even fake how familiar we are with him. He is my first and strongest love and father, Mike. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Mike is your grandson, and you're not a stranger to us. You're our own grandfather." "Oh my God, this is unbelievable." James, too, could not contain his emotions and wiped away a tear. And I immediately felt a kind of inner affection for Mike, a warmth, you know. And I couldn't figure out who he reminded me of. The eyes, the same huge, as saucers, gray eyes. And dimples and smile, your nose. That's what happiness has fallen to me at an old age. I thought I'd die alone like a feathergrass in a field. Cindy, tell me, how did you and Thomas meet? Why did you break up? It's very important to me too, because after my son went to Los Angeles, he forgot me and my mother. He never visited, he only called occasionally, saying that everything was fine, that he worked in a cab. The woman sighed heavily and answered, "I myself was brought up in an orphanage. What I had to endure, words can't tell you. I do not know what a family is, the warmth of a home, because my good-for-nothing mother abandoned me in the maternity ward. This has tormented me since I was a child. Many times I thought, why? Why did she abandon me? Didn't she love me at all? Didn't she want to? Why did she give birth then?" I was mentally angry at her, and I made a vow to myself that never, no matter what happened, I would not abandon my child when I grew up and become a cuckoo like her. After graduation, I managed to get a job at this restaurant as a waitress. Count my luck. The pay was good, the tips were generous, and the owner was understanding, not arrogant. At first I was so clumsy, timid, afraid of everything. But then nothing experienced girls taught me. I got the hang of it. Thomas and I met by chance. I was terribly late for work that day, and the bus, as bad luck would have it, broke down, so I voted on the side of the road, hoping someone would give me a lift, and that someone was Thomas. There was an attraction between us almost immediately, a spark. He took me for a ride in a couple of minutes. He didn't take any money, but he asked for my phone number and immediately asked me out. He was like that, sharp, brave, pushy. Our romance was very wild and passionate. We literally dissolved into each other. But we fought a lot too. Thomas had a very explosive temper. In addition, my fiancé was jealous of me literally everything in the world. He demanded that I quit the restaurant immediately. He didn't like the fact that I worked the night shift and men were staring at me. But I didn't want to lose a good job, and Thomas, to be honest, couldn't support the family financially on his own. I was so tired of the constant scandals that we finally broke up. For me, it was very painful and hard because I really loved him. After the breakup of the relationship, I realized that I was pregnant, and I decided to move beyond all the insults and make up that the child had a father. But then I heard the tragic news that Thomas had died. I cried and suffered for a long time and became a single mother as a result. It was very hard, especially the first 2 years. I had to go to work early because I didn't have enough money. I sent Mike to the nursery. He was always sick, crying, and didn't want to go there. And then he lost all speech. How many doctors I ran around with him, God only knows. I prayed day and night that my baby would talk again. But you know, no matter how hard it was for me to raise my child alone, I don't regret giving birth to him one bit. When they brought me in the hospital, this helpless little lump, I breastfed him, and I felt such love in my heart, such tenderness. I realized that here he is, the meaning of my life. Everything else is unimportant. I have been living for my son ever since, and I have no time to think about myself. And what a coincidence that my own grandfather healed my son from his illness. You might not have read my ad, and we would have never met. Apparently, fate brought us together, no differently. I'm very happy about that. After all, now we are one family, which I never had. The old man wept again and squeezed Jenna's hand tightly. And you know what? Why don't you move in with me after you're discharged? The house is nice and spacious, and I feel unbearably sad and lonely there alone. I wander around like a ghost and don't know where to put myself. Why are you and your son in a rented room? And the fact that you're all alone and alone, it's bad. I'll tell you this. You can't get Thomas back. There's nothing you can do about it. And you're a young, beautiful woman, and Mike needs a father. So don't give up on yourself. Mike ran into the room, out of breath, and handed my mother a coffee and a muffin. He overheard the conversation and squealed with joy. Hooray! We're moving in with Grandpa, aren't we, Mom? How cool. I won't go to that awful boarding school now, will I? I want to go to a regular school like everyone else. And I can play with Bax every day. Oh, Mom, I forgot to tell you. There's a policeman waiting in the corridor to talk to Grandpa. He wants to know how long we're going to stay with him. Cindy opened the door to the room and invited the young man in. He smiled broadly and openly at her. He introduced himself. Hello, my name is Alex. We didn't really get to know each other in a hurry yesterday. It turns out that when you're not crying or screaming, you're such a beautiful woman. The young mother was embarrassed by the unexpected compliment and replied, I'm Cindy, and my son's name is Mike. The policeman laughed. Well, we got to know him very well. He's a great kid. How's Bax? Is he feeling any better? I need to ask your grandfather a few questions about last night's incident, if you don't mind. Cindy tapped herself on the forehead. That's right. Mike, let's go. Bax is alone in there. It's time to give him an injection and a bandage and feed the poor guy. Get well, James, my dear. We'll come back tomorrow morning. Mike shook the old man's hand and said, Bye, Grandpa. See you tomorrow. I'll take a picture of Bax today, and I'll show it to you. The pensioner waved goodbye to the kid and smiled benignly. The policeman told the old man the following. The bad guys are behind bars again and will get what they deserve, don't worry. Here, sign some papers. They've only just been released, and they're up to their old tricks again. But they never got a break, so I don't know why they attacked you in the first place. Also, let me ask you something. This woman, Cindy, who was she to you? The old man replied, I didn't understand it myself, to be honest, what those scumbags wanted. I thought you might know something. They were yelling at me to give back the gold my son hid in the house. But that just can't be. My son worked as a simple cab driver, and we hardly spoke to him. We rarely saw each other. He died like a hero, rescuing children from the water. So what gold they were looking for, I don't know. And Cindy is the fiancée of my son. The deceased and Mike is my own grandson, as it turned out. But I just found out about it myself. Why did you ask about her all of a sudden? Did you like her? She's a beauty, isn't she? And my grandson's a clever boy, such a lovely boy. The serviceman was a little embarrassed, and then he said quietly, Well, to be honest, yes, I did. I've been living alone for a long time. Somehow, I don't get along with my personal life. The girls don't want to get involved with a policeman, to wait in ambushes, to worry. I'm never home. It's a dog's job. What can I say? But I love her and don't want to do anything else. I like to help people, sincerely, from the heart. So Jenna has no one but her son. Right? The old man winked conspiratorially. They live at my house now. I invited them, because it's so depressing to be alone. You know the address, so you can go and check on Bax at the same time. They are at home. The policeman smiled appreciatively and left. James really liked a good-natured big man with his kind eyes and open mind, and he wouldn't mind at all if Cindy got to know him better. And what if she did? She wouldn't have to be alone forever. It was evening outside. Mike was getting ready for school and doing his homework. Bax was napping on the recliner and recuperating, and Cindy was getting James ready to leave for the hospital. Surprisingly, she felt so familiar and comfortable in the old man's house, so at home, as if they had lived here all the time. Suddenly, there was a knock at the gate. Bax, though still weak, rose from his seat and barked loudly. Jenna's heart went in her heels. Who could it be at a time like this? But when she saw on the doorstep the same young policeman who had come to the hospital and taken Bax to surgery and had stayed with Mike at the time, Cindy smiled and ran happily to open the door, like an old good friend. This young, sturdy, smiling Alex guy somehow made her like and trust him. He made her feel at once calm and trustworthy. The policeman hesitated. Hello again, Cindy. I was just passing by, so I thought I'd stop by and see how the dog was doing. He's better, and I'm gonna pay the little hero a visit. May I? I'm not empty-handed, so I bought a cake for tea. The woman flushed and led him into the kitchen. Of course you can. Come on in. Mike and I are very happy to see you, really. Bax is better now. You can see his tail waving. His appetite is better. We know the worst is over, thank you. We are in time. Mike, come and see who's here. The boy ran up and extended his hand to the man in a businesslike manner. Hello, Uncle Alex. How nice of you to come. I can't figure out my math, and my mom's busy at the moment. Can you help me? And he immediately took the man to his room. He was happy to tutor the boy and help him solve his examples. And then the three of them drank tea and cake, and talked about other things. Alex was so nice and cozy here with Micah and Jenna. I did not want to leave. This blonde beauty with such luscious, lush forms had been stirring his mind and depriving him of sleep since the first time he had seen her the day before yesterday, so excited and terrified. She had kissed Mike like that, held him to her and cried, and was in that moment unspeakably beautiful. The woman had no false eyelashes, no botched lips, but she had the kind of natural appeal and femininity you rarely see nowadays. Rules of decorum didn't allow him to stay any longer, and Alex began to get ready to go home. Cindy went to see him off, throwing her coat over her shoulders. Coming out of the gate, Alex suddenly turned her to him. I like you very much, Cindy. Can I still come to you and Mike? I think about you all the time. I don't know what's going on with me. I must be in love. The woman timidly replied. To be honest, I liked you right away too. You made me feel so safe and good. I'd like you to come over anytime. Mike and I would be glad to have you, especially since my son is so fond of you. He told me how brave and strong you were, how clever you were at handling the bandits and guarding him. The satisfied man left, taking the woman's phone number, and Cindy stood at the gate. Alex was the first man who had made a woman's heart beat faster since Thomas. She had forgotten what it was for 6 years, and a pleasant excitement and exhaustion overwhelmed her. James recovered quickly, and soon he was discharged home. Bax was very happy to meet his owner. He licked him for half an hour and petted him, not moving a step away. The dog also recovered and life went on as usual. They all lived together in the old man's house. They were really one friendly family. Their relations were so warm and sincere. Cindy now went to her shifts safely, knowing that Grandpa would pick Mike up from school, feed him lunch, and do his homework together. Winter was coming, and it was getting noticeably colder outside. James decided to re-shingle the roof in 2 places, replacing the slate so it wouldn't leak anywhere. He asked Alex to help, since he was there very often now. He gladly agreed to help the old man out. He was a sturdy fellow, with a slant to his shoulders. It was a day off. Cindy had baked cabbage rolls and made a nice borscht, and the men were up on the roof. Mike, of course, was there to help, in case something needed to be served. When James peeled back a piece of the old slate, it came off surprisingly easily, as if it hadn't been nailed at all. Suddenly, he saw a bag between the roofing felt and the joists. He tried to get it out himself, but he could not. Then he shouted, Alex, give me a hand. What kind of bag? It's heavy, you bastard. What could it be? Is it construction debris? Well, drag it down there, we'll see, or we might fall off the height. When they unfolded the 4 bags on the ground, they both gasped. Alex even whistled. There was gold jewelry, coins, and jewels. What wasn't there? Rings, earrings with expensive stones, necklaces. The old man clutched his head. That's what the bandits were looking for in my house. And I was living here and didn't know that I had all this stuff on my roof. But where did it come from? And what to do with it? Cindy ran up to the noise, and looking at the beauty of it, was dumbfounded. God damn it. So it's true. So the bandits didn't come here for nothing. James, sweetheart, take all this to the police with Alex, out of harm's way. We don't need other people's trinkets. They won't bring us happiness. Just to get on with our lives. I'm already scared. Mike was staring at the real treasure too. He watched the stones glisten and shimmer and said, mesmerized, "Mommy, it's beautiful. Let's keep at least one ring as a memento or earrings. Just look how beautiful they are, the ones with the red stone." But Cindy answered him sternly, "No, Mike, we'll take everything to the police. We don't want anything that doesn't belong to us. And remember, never take anything that isn't yours, whatever it is." In the orphanage where I grew up, kids who stole were called a bad word and punished severely. So don't even think such thoughts out of your head. Is that clear? The boy muttered angrily, "Don't swear, Mom. I was just saying that. It's just that you're so beautiful, but I don't have earrings, so I thought." Alex looked dumbfounded at the gold and jewels and said, "It's the first time I've seen so much gold, and people who don't want to get rich from it. And I'll give the earrings to your mother anyway, Mike. They may not be as expensive, but they are from my heart and with my honestly earned money. Well, tomorrow we'll take it to the state. We'll also find out where it was stolen. Maybe there are prints." After an investigation, it turned out that really many years ago, 3 bandits robbed a bank. There was such a high-profile story. Then the robbers were never found. And in fact, they used Thomas as an ordinary cab driver in the dark. That is, the guy did not even know who he was taking, where he was coming from, and where he was going. But things didn't go according to plan with the bandits. A chase ensued, and they were forced to flee, and the cab driver was told to take the same bag to a certain place and hide it there. But the guy couldn't stand it and peeked inside, so he couldn't resist and appropriated the loot. He thought for a long time about where to hide it, and probably left it quietly in his own house when his parents were out of the house. Those bandits were imprisoned for another crime, and soon Thomas died tragically. That story is overgrown and forgotten in time, but recently the bandits were released and decided to return the loot. So they figured there was nowhere else for Thomas to hide his stolen goods except in his own home. James, upon learning of all this, only shook his head and said wistfully, "Oh, son. And I told you, there's nothing for you to do in Los Angeles. Stay in town." That's what happened. All the time I was walking on a razor's edge, one step aside and that's it. What can I say now? I loved you anyway, no matter what you were. I hope Mike doesn't repeat your mistakes. I'll try to raise him that way. The old man was paid a decent share after surrendering his jewels to the state. And he finally realized his long-held dream of renting a small room with an impressive yard and opening his own shelter for homeless animals. He called it "Make Good Things Happen." Mike helped him with everything. Together, with their own forces, from improvised materials, they built spacious enclosures and kennels for the dogs, as well as a playground with various obstacles and barriers. The old man was worried about the fate of each puppy and tried, together with his grandson, to put him in the most reliable and kind hands. Alex was already living with Jenna together. He was a full-fledged member of the family. The woman was sympathetic to his work, did not nag, waited faithfully, prepared thermos and sandwiches. She was proud that her lover was doing such a noble job, saving people's lives, protecting them from such scoundrels and scoundrels. She was no longer working her ass off, taking only a few shifts a week. The rest of the time Cindy devoted to her family. Every time she said that word, she smiled. After all, it had been her lifelong dream to love and be loved, to care for someone and to know that the people closest to her cared about you too. James felt the same way. He often went to Nancy and Thomas graves and told them everything, and at the end he said, "My dears, I wanted to get to you sooner, but now I'm in no hurry. It turns out that life has sprinkled a lot of happiness on my share. I wish you could have seen it. This is Mike, Nancy's grandson, and me, and your son Thomas." He sincerely believed his family could hear him and rejoice with him.